Hello, Helsinki! Yeah, I arrived 2 days ago, and it was actually warm here. Yeah, it's supposed to be a joke. Yeah. And yeah, they're here. Okay, and that's me. And that thing totally doesn't work, so I'm gonna improvise. So yeah, my name is Andrey. My last name is my Twitter handle, so if you want to follow me on Twitter. As Yanni said, yeah, fuck this thing. I created a library, it's called LintStaged, and it's actually won the open source award that I was really surprised about, because to me it was like not a big deal, but then I got that in my post box. I was like, oh, cool. And I gave a talk about that library last year as a lightning talk at the same conference, at a different venue. And you might be wondering why I'm telling you that in front of design systems thing. That's because I had that slide in my presentation. And the cool thing about that slide is that just a few weeks ago at JS Heroes, my friend Sergey Rubanov, he posted that picture and pinged me on Twitter. And I was like, wait a minute. Is it like a meme of a meme? So yeah, I like that. Hey, yeah, I'm from Vienna, the boring city of Vienna, quoting Juho. And that city is known for React Vienna, which I'm also co-organizer of, and that conference called ReasonCon that they held for a second time this year. And Nick, who is also here, was also organizing that conference, so you can talk to us about it. Also, Vienna is famous for that building that is a Museum of History of Art, which I really, really like. And that building is famous for using paintings as wallpapers, quite literally, if you can see. So they don't have money for wallpapers, so they just put paintings so high and so tall you can actually look at them. And one of my favorite paintings in that museum is the Tower of Babel by Peter Bruegel. And the story about behind that painting is that united people, they tried to build a huge tower to reach the heaven, and then God saw that, and he was like, I actually don't like that. So what he did is like, he scattered them across the globe and switched, let them speak different languages. So the God decided they're gonna speak different languages, so they couldn't complete the tower. And then I heard that story, I was like, interesting, how many languages there are? And apparently there were more than 7,000 active human languages being spoken on the planet right now. And it's very interesting, I thought, because some languages are quite interesting. I speak German because I live in Austria, and I think German is a really interesting language. And some languages are even more interesting. And some languages are just, you look at them and like, yeah, totally got it. I tried to learn French once, didn't last for long. So I thought, what is a language? And I started searching for a definition of a language, and I found that one. There were like many, many definitions of a language, so I found that one, and I really liked it. So language is a system with a limited finite system of units that combine hierarchically and recursively into larger units. It's software engineer speaking, that's why I liked it. But I am also, half of me is a kind of a designer. Not kind of, I'm coming from design background pretty much. And I thought, interesting, there's also design language, right? And in design language we have these fundamental things like typography, colors, and spacing. And combined these three fundamental things, they can produce unlimited set of variations, right? It's just sometimes we don't need unlimited variations, you know? So sometimes it's even better when we have less than more. And how can we reduce the amount of variations, we can create design language system by reducing the core to that. So basically, what we can do, we can reduce the choice in each of these things, creating like type scale, color scale, and spacing scale. And that thing is known, of course, it's not only that, but we kind of rely to that as a design system, oftentimes. It's very simplified. But what is a design system? Design system defines a set of design-related rules as a system of instructions that can be reused across multiple products. And I have a nice illustration that shows a design system and the lack of a design system in the real world. And it's two governments, German government and an Austrian government. And they have multiple ministers. And then you look at the logotypes of the German government ministers. They all look the same. They all follow the same set of rules. They have a logo here, a flag, and then a title. In Austria, on the other hand, people are much more creative, apparently. So they thought, yeah, we're going to order the logotype that my son, he just learned Photoshop. And yeah, this is how we get it. And it also follows to the digital world, right? So like all the websites of German government, they follow the same rules. So they pretty much look the same, although there are different websites. And there are many of them. In Austria, though, every website is unique. It's because people are much more creative, of course. But it's actually not so good for user experience because people kind of think the government is that thing that is, yeah, the government. And whereas no design system, it's really hard to use these websites when you switch between them. And you have to switch between them if you're searching for something. And that brings me to the topic of the design language of digital products. And in digital products, we actually, instead of using like the design language, we use user interface as language, right? So we think in user interface terms. So we think is kind of in lists of things that consist of other smaller things, like avatar, text, buttons, icons. So we think in components, ultimately. And the idea of a component isn't new. So the native platforms have been using these ideas for many, many years now, or even decades. So you can just drag and drop components into your views, create a user interface. And on that, we also have this idea coming from Yandex, a Russian company. They invented the BEM, and also some other people inventing like similar ideas. And probably the most well-known component library for that is Bootstrap. Probably everyone knows it, right? Yeah, that's what I would expect. But the problem is, by the end of the day, designers still have to work with tools that doesn't support any of this component thinking. So designers have to work with primitives like arrows, rectangles, stars, polygons. Ultimately, tools force us to design our digital products with stars and triangles. I don't know, it's weird. And developers have to go and implement the stars and triangles with languages called HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the point here is that developers and designers, they speak different languages, ultimately. So if we look at the web developers' languages, words like HTML, which seem to be, that's the cheat sheet, and it seemed to be short, but it's not simple, right? So there are lots of things I didn't know exist because it's a living standard, it's getting updated. So new things getting added. And not everyone, I bet not everyone here knows all of them and how to use all of them. And let's look at CSS, the Flexbox, the almighty Flexbox. And I've been doing CSS for many, many years now. And every time I need to center something, even with the Flexbox, I struggle. I have to go to the documentation, which looks like that. Simple, very simple language called CSS. Easy to learn. Just one spec, just Even not the spec, it's just the guide how to, like, the spec is 10 times longer. And on the other hand, the designers, as I said, they have these beautiful design tools that work with stars and triangles and arrows. And they design beautiful user interfaces, and they put them on beautiful dribble. And you look at it, it's like, it's such a beautiful user interface. It's so much beauty in it. But then you think about, okay, now I have to implement that. So how do I transition from first screen to the second screen? Or how does this user interface should look on a bigger screen? And the answer is, we don't know. As developers, we look at that and we say, yeah, that's cool. But what should I do about it, right? And that's, in my opinion, where the question comes from. Should designers code? Or should probably developers design? And it's probably not a bad idea at all to learn both, but it's hard. So what if we could have something common that we could share as designers and developers? So as I said, designer's language looks like this. And where's developer's language? Is there something in between we could use as a common language? And I believe that's UI primitives. I believe that's the UI components. So what are UI primitives? Let's take a look at the components I showed before. So if you look at them, they all can have multiple variations, right? So avatar can be bigger, smaller, text can be different colors, input can be in different states, button can be in different variations as well, and we can have multiple icons. But the cool thing about that is these things are building blocks. So now, combining them different ways, we can create pretty much every user interface we want. So we can search toolbar or login form out of the same primitives. And the thing about that is, like, if you look at the button, it has different variations, like default, primary, secondary. And then designer think about that button. She might think, yeah, it's a default button, or it's a primary button. But then developer start thinking about that button, or implementing a button. Things suddenly get more complicated, right? So it's like, okay, should I be using input type button, or should I just div it? No one gonna notice, right? Because it's a class name that makes it look like a button. So yeah, why not? Well, where's the problem? You can end up here, and they actually don't want to end up here. So what if we, developers and designers, could do kind of share the same language here? And, well, looks familiar to me. It looks like React. So yeah, the good news is we have React that has components. So everything in React is a component. So we can do that. And you might be thinking, yeah, OK. You telling us not really interesting details. But the interesting part about using primitives like that is that now we can generate style guides out of our code automatically. And you might be, yeah, good for you, but yeah, HTML has a button. We don't need a new button. And the thing is that that button isn't that button. So the button is a capital B is a component. And the difference here is like there's a HTML button. We use CSS as a semantic. And we pretty much can throw HTML away because, yeah. And CSS is a powerful tool, so it can be pretty much anything. The component button, we can establish strict contracts and using prop types or types. And we don't use CSS and HTML as APIs for us as developers, and we want to use the button. And another good thing about it is they can reuse it everywhere. So if we want to fix something or add more accessibility to that button, we do it in one single place. And usually, to that point, people are convinced by that. But then I say, and you should also do this text instead of using P and H1 and other text. People are like, wait, what? And But if you look at the text, it kind of also have same properties as a button. So for designer, it's normal, secondary, dangerous text. But for developers, again, what it's going to be? Developer can decide. It's always a good choice when developers decide. So I have a bad news for you. Then developers decide what it's going to be. You end up here, because bad things can happen on the way. Yeah, and the same idea. We can speak the same language as designer and developer, and also get all the benefits of abstracting the primitives, like creating style guides or restricting the way we use our components. But there's one more reason, I think, that speaks for primitives. Because in HTML, we can create text, and we can create headings. You can even create links. It's starting getting complicated at the bottom, but then the designer wants a dropdown, right? The dropdown, almighty dropdown. And you look at that code, it's the most famous HTML framework and CSS framework, Bootstrap. And you think, OK, I'm going to copy-paste that. And then you end up here, and there are some ARIA things you probably never heard of, but it's OK. You just copy-paste it. But it's really hard. It's really easy to break that. So if you do something wrong, this part, things might not work. On the other hand, these primitives, it looks the same thing. These primitives might look like that. So not only it's easier to read and understand what it's doing, it's also much harder to break, right? So in my opinion, HTML versus primitives might look like this. So the downsides are that the forced to use HTML as the API for our components, for our design language. And we have to write a lot of it. And we have a lot of choices to do every single time. So we rewrite our user interfaces using same instruments every single time. The primitives, we create the shared language with designers, and we encapsulate all this data in the single things, and then you can reuse them. And you might be thinking, OK, but for designers, how is it better for designers, right? And it turns out it's also have lots of benefits by doing so. So if we can abstract HTML away, now we can render our components in Sketch and let the designers work with the same primitives as we are, using React Sketch app, for example. And Undesign is one of also famous UI libraries, leverages that by not only shipping the components to you, they also create a Sketch library that's the same components. So you can just drag them around and create your UI quickly. And it looks really cool because you have a structured components in it. And that's something what Airbnb is using as well to create, like, to generate the whole design system for them and put them as a components into Sketch and let the designers work with the same primitives as developers do. And I couldn't include the video here, but it goes even further because now they can do napkin design and make computer vision create designs for them pretty quickly, so they can iterate on design in seconds instead of hours or days. And there are lots of benefits, but one of them is also for design system as well. Because if you look at the definition of a design system as a set of design-related rules, as a system of instructions, you might be thinking, interesting, instructions. And as an engineer, you might be also thinking, OK, we could probably just take the instructions and program them in the code. So the definition might become like, design system defines a set of UI primitives that can be reused across single or multiple products. And UI primitives as a common language also kind of alters the definition I gave before, because we can just replace language and units with primitives and UI. And it brings me to the pretty much end of my topic, where I would like to say that I think the language we share between all the team members is much more important as the technology we can share. So we have web as a universal technology, but I think the universal language goes above that. And it's much more important to invest into the language as into technology. Because if we have a language, we can leverage technology to create greater things. And that's something Artyom and me are teaching. And we are creating that website where you want to share all these ideas and start writing about them. So if you're interested in the topic, yeah, please subscribe to the newsletter and follow us on Twitter. Thank you.